Okay, I think we are back. Hold on, let me see. It still has you muted and will let me. Why won't it turn off the mute? I muted you and it now won't let me unmute you. Can you hear me okay? I can see you. I don't know why it is not unmuting you. Let's try this. Try now. Yeah, it is. It's saying no sound. Is everything good on your end? I don't see. Hold on here. Let me. Check. I know everybody can hear me, but it's showing you now as muted, and it won't let me unmute you. What is going? Huh? This is so weird. Here, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna switch you out of here. Can you exit and come back in? Okay. Well, bear with us, folks. We're trying to get this all worked out. I don't know what is going on with this. Why? It was all working fine, and I muted him to start the show, and then we come back, and yeah, he's he's not in the. I can't hear anything from him. Weird. This is so weird. Properties. Okay. Yeah. Let's try that.
Emotional damage.
So that's working okay. So we'll have him back here in just a second. It says I cannot unmute other participants. Oh, he has to unmute. That's what it is. That's the only thing I can. Whoa. Now I just lost the whole call. I wasn't trying to do that. There we go. Some of this stuff just does not work well. It gets incredibly frustrating. We spend all this time setting stuff up for the show, and then it all just drops out right like when you want it to. And why is... I know we're live on Facebook. We should be up on... Yeah, we should be up on Twitter as well. But wow, everything just decided to mess up today. Hopefully we're on Twitter. You know, that's as I go through our settings here, everything, yeah, or yeah, everything looks good. I don't get this. This is really odd, folks. So many things that were completely fine, just fine, all of a sudden. I hope you're all doing okay. I lost my chat, so I can't see the chat. I can see a little bit of it. I can see Max Lab was in, or is in. Wow, what is... This is so weird. Okay, come on. I'm gonna try to log in on some things. Watch restream. I bet you this is what it was. It was probably because I was trying to get into my restream chat and it all messed up on it. Yeah, see, it's saying invalid email or username, and it's my valid stuff. It's, oh my god. So there's some problem with that. There's some problem with it. Oh, I hear him.
I'm here.
Okay, there you are. So, all right. So I do know we're going out on Facebook. Okay, it doesn't look like it's going out on Twitter. Okay. Let me check YouTube. And we'll have to monitor the chats on the on the thing here because
I don't know. I'm not in charge. I'm going to eat now because you made me frustrated.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, this is all kinds of messed up. So
I think you're trying to be too fancy, Skipper, and
I probably am
picking a platform that it clearly is above your pay grade.
Every time I think I get it figured out, like things mess up. I will say I think they have this download thing, this restream download, and it has not been reading my account. Okay, so I do know that we are live on YouTube. So I've got the YouTube chats up. So we've got Facebook and YouTube. Twitter appears to be the issue. So
I'm just going to take your word for all this because I can't see anything but you, and quite frankly, I'd much rather be looking at anything but you.
Now, okay, we'll be able to go ahead and do the show without an issue, but you should be able to see me and you on your screen.
I can see us, and once again, I'd much rather be reading chats.
You should be able to see those down in the corner.
Yeah, they're not showing up for me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Let me try to
refresh. No, let's not click on any other. Oh no, folks, this is what happens when you leave a Marine officer in charge of anything.
I forgot. I took off studio mode. Hold on. Now I can make the changes to it. Sorry. I'm trying to refresh. Okay, so
we are professional.
We're professional enough. So okay, so now it's refreshed, so it should.
Yeah, it should.
There we go.
It should what?
No, we got it back. You should see it down in the corner now.
Yep. No, got nothing.
You got nothing.
No, I got nothing.
Well, that's okay. We'll go ahead and we'll do the show just kind of as is.
You can just read all of the beautiful things that are said about me by our fans.
That I will do. I'll keep you up on everything. Now you
join the army.
I'm just going to sit here and eat because I don't know what else we're doing. I'm so out of the loop right now. Skipper texted me 10 minutes before the finish of my workout going, "Hey, we doing the show tonight?"
I forgot it was Tuesday. I've been going through the whole day thinking it was Monday, and then I was at work finishing up, and I was like, "Oh, it's Tuesday." Yeah. So I rushed home, and then I was like, "Oh, I better get in touch with TC." So, but that's okay. We can do a show. We won't have the chats. Chris Stockton asks, "What's for dinner?"
Well, I was gonna have my pulled pork that I slaved over on Sunday, and was going to eat the last of that tonight, but I rushed from my workout to the shower to the show, Chris, and so things were not set up the way they were supposed to, so now I'm just eating cottage cheese.
So I do have a question. Why did you shower? We can't smell you.
Because when I work out, I sweat. I'm not like the Air Force.
Okay, I got a quick story to tell you about when I was on vacation. Um, so my brother, they just sold their house. They're looking to buy another one, but until they find the right fit, they've got a trailer or camper. They're like, oh, we're just going to spend the summer in the camper, no problem, until we find a house. So I went to visit them at their lake, their camper, and everything. You froze up for a second there. So I went to visit them, and they were like, "Oh, so we have our security for the uh, park. He comes around, and he's former military." And I go, "Oh, what branch?" And they're like, "He hasn't said." I was like, "Oh, okay." Does he wear any military stuff? They're like, "Oh, he wears a tactical vest." And I go, "What?" He's campground security, and he wears a tactical vest. And I go, "Okay, does he wear any unit patches?" And they were like, "No, he doesn't have any of those." And I go, "What do you want to bet he's Air Force?" Sure enough, he comes around, and my other brother was a Marine, starts talking to him, and is like, "Hey, so what service were you?" And he's like, "Oh, I was Air Force." And like, my older brother like looks at me, and like as soon as the guy drove off, he's like, "Dude, you called it."
Life is what you make it, and if you make it about making fun of the Air Force, it's okay.
Yeah, it is okay. We can get by with that.
No offense to our Air Force veteran friends at all. Like, and even if we do offend you, we're not worried.
You know, one thing this is a weird Air Force thing. If they're Air Force, they'll say I'm Air Force. However, if they were in security forces, they're going to say I was Air Force security forces because they want you to know they're not like the rest of the Air Force.
Either that or they're contractually obligated to let everybody know they were security forces so that people are like, okay, even we reject these guys.
Just funny things that we notice.
Just literally the very definition of the blue line. Like,
now, I do have a question for you. Did they ever?
You keep doing this to me. You keep saying I have this story and I have a question, and I'm like, one of these days you're going to hit me with something hard, and I'm not going to be prepared for it. So anyway, go
ahead. Do you have any training on sloped roofs, or is that way above?
It takes a certain amount of skill to stay on a sloped roof unobserved, and I would have to say from what we saw this weekend, say like on Saturday afternoon, evening, that skill level is reserved for just a very small amount of people, and I would say it's probably reserved for a group of people who play a lot of like Minecraft and still live with their parents and have had contact with the Secret Service and the FBI in the near past.
Yeah, I was laughing about that a little bit today, that they were, oh, sloped roof, that's why they couldn't do. I was like, okay. And then others started dunking on them, and I was just like, yeah, you deserve this. You should have known people were going to mess with you about this. And with all the stuff going on.
The director of the Secret Service today, folks, surprise, surprise, if you haven't figured out what we're talking about, admitted that the individual in question, the Patsy, was a person of suspicion for the Secret Service. So
do with that what you will. I do, the whole situation, it's like, you can't play these games, You can't play with, oh, we're going to mess with his security detail, and, we're going to take it away, we're going to reduce it in size, we're going to do all these things. And then when something happens, then say, oh, well, yeah, that's not on us. It's like, no, that's 100% on you. It looks incredibly suspicious.
You know, the thing that the initial shock on Saturday, you know, here's going to be a common theme because you know Skipper knows I'm still working towards the last of my weight loss, and now I actually work for it besides just eating differently.
I thought you were trying to gain mass. I'm sorry.
No, well, I am. I'm trying to gain mass, but I'm also trying to work off the last of the fat as I put mass on. So as I was finishing up my workout on Saturday, the news broke of the event, and the initial shock of it was, holy crap, they actually tried.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't a moment of excitement, if you know what I mean. It was one of those like, this is bad.
Yeah.
This is very bad. Even watching it the first 3 or 4 times, I was like, this could have been way worse. And somebody very close to me, like the very first words out of this individual's mouth were, "Oh, he's such a narcissist. He did this to himself." Now, I'm not like, I'm not. This is the thing. Clint Russell from Liberty Lockdown podcast. I had him on my first season of Libertarian Lowdown on my channel. Like, Clint nailed it, and I'll paraphrase what he said, but he nailed it when he said, "Look, we're at a place in our society, in our culture, in the republic, with the state." And frequent viewers of the show know that I use state interchangeably for government. Well, actually, to replace government, because we don't have a government; we have the state at all levels. We're at such a place with our state where an event like what happened at the Trump rally on Saturday leaves people wondering if they're that dirty or that inept. Those are our only options. That's it. It's either they're that dirty or they're that inept. And either way, everybody involved was involved. There's just no way around it. And you almost want to lean towards they're that dirty, because if they're that inept, we're all even dumber than they are.
Mm-hmm.
I'm adding that part, Clint. You know, I'm paraphrasing Clint, but adding that part, and that's what it comes down to for me. They have to be that dirty, because the only other option is we're all that stupid.
You know, and that they really do believe we are that stupid. They do.
Well, but do we give them any? Have we given them any other choice but to believe that? Honestly,
you know, here's the thing. You know, like, I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, this is huge conspiracy stuff." No, like, I don't think it's as much as conspiracy as there are people that incompetent, and there are people willing to play politics in those ways, and I think we're seeing that.
okay. I'm not going to dispute that, but
I mean, if it's a conspiracy, I will absolutely wait for it to. Sorry, I'm a little bit out of focus there for some reason. I'll wait for there to be a commission or something so that we can see that there is a conspiracy. So I'm not saying that there isn't.
You mean when your kids? So when your son has children?
Well, yeah, if they hide stuff, but I think if this election plays out the way I think it is right now, I think we'll know if there was a conspiracy.
Well,
so they did ask.
No, wait. Like let's be on. Go ahead. You said we had somebody ask something.
Yeah. Did you all know there was someone on top of the water tower?
That doesn't. I mean, that doesn't shock me. That's a perfect spot for a counter sniper. So
My thoughts too. That's what I think. Uh,
I lost.
watch the Hollywood.
I lost you for a second, Skipper. So
Oh, sorry about that. We watch Hollywood movies like Shooter and know they're supposed to check the high ground. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you definitely have to protect that.
yeah, I don't see any reason. I don't see any reason to see somebody on the water tower, and well, unless the person who is asking about or talking about the water tower is saying, how did the person on the water tower not see, the shooter on the sloped roof?
Yeah, true. I figured something out while we're sitting here. I'm looking at the whole thing on Restream. I know why we're not on Twitter. My check mark, my blue check mark is up for renewal.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
See, it's not me being an idiot.
I have never called you an idiot that you're aware of.
No, you just called me a Marine.
No, I correctly labeled you a Marine.
I know what you were really trying to say.
And an officer. So
that too. Yeah, there we go.
So no, I guess when I look at this situation, I got the dander up on a few people today, and it kind of it proved my point. So this is what I said on Facebook, and our audience has gotten to know you really well, especially since we've been waiting for Juan to be able to come back and be our producer, because God knows after tonight we certainly need him. But I posted this earlier today. I'll just read it for everybody. I said, the more I dig into the assassination attempt on DJT, the more none of it makes sense. This wasn't a miracle. It was a setup. He was the target, but not the end goal. Trump's supporters being played like fiddles. The left and right are setting us all up for something bigger. Too many are sitting back talking about DJT like he's the chosen of God, and Saturday night proves it. The fix is in when the left and Trump backers all get mad when you call this out for what it is, a plot against we the people, and all of them are in on it. And to prove that I was wrong, a bunch of Trump supporters got mad at me.
Well, he is our Lord and Savior. He was sent here by God to forgive our sins. Whenever someone says, you're in a Trump cult, I'll just come back with that. And they're like, see? It's like, you're an idiot. I'm just making fun of you. Here's one thing
that's the thing, though. I've never seen you that way, because you will call out the bad stuff.
Yeah.
You will call out the bad stuff.
Oh,
and you don't look at someone like me and say, because you're criticizing him, you must be a Biden supporter. Because you know me better than that.
Oh, absolutely. What's funny is, like, I'm a Trump supporter almost purely for the chaos that it brings, because that he is an agent of chaos for the government, but our government needs to be torn down in some ways, and that's where I align with him. But I will say this.
It needs a complete, like, as much as I talk about law enforcement needing massive overhaul, like, if we could we just reform, like, the janitorial services for most government buildings? Like, could we start small? Like really, not to pick on the janitorial services, but, like, could we, something manageable? Could we get that?
And that's why I'm like, I really hope Trump wins. I hope Michael Flynn ends up either as in charge of the CIA or the FBI, the two groups who went after him, and I hope he just totally decimates the inside of those organizations, because they're right for it. But I will say this:
could we actually, like, put Flynn in charge of them, both of them, just long enough for him to deactivate all of them.
I think it's possible. I think
I would be. Yeah, but Trump wants to build the FBI new headquarters.
I do understand that, but
he needs a new jail.
But there could be something devious to that. It could be, no, we're only gonna, like, we'll make everyone field agents. There's only gonna be so many desks or room for so many desks. We'll see.
I don't want any of them in the field. I want them, well, unless it's literally in a field. Like,
we've got Greg, the flying auditor. Hey, welcome. Glad to have you. Then we got Eric, KD7 LTN. I did share out your GoFundMe. Everyone, if you're on Twitter, follow my Twitter. I shared out Eric's GoFundMe. I also put it in our Veteran Nation group. If you have a couple dollars to spare, he is trying to get money for a mobility scooter. He's got some health issues, and he's a Navy veteran and a good supporter of the program. So please do that. One thing, okay, if there's a conspiracy theory about the whole assassination, okay, and I put this out earlier today, just because if it happens, I want to be able to say, see, I told you so. Watch. From now until the election, if there's an attempted, it won't be a successful, it'll be attempted assassination on Biden, then you know it's a conspiracy, because that'll be a false flag to try to get back some of those sympathy points that Trump is getting for the assassination attempt.
Well.
See, yeah, you're thinking about it.
No, like, I think it would play into my mind that it was, and I don't. Maybe that's what you're saying. I think it has less to do with. It would have less to do with him getting votes back, and more to do with they might actually just try to scare him to death. Is what I think. I'm like.
I put out in January, I think he was going to be replaced anyway. But all that talk since the assassination.
I said it over a year ago that they're going to do their best to try and get him to step down. I'm not trying to, excuse the term. I'm not trying to Trump you.
They try to get him to step down is one thing, but what the media was trying to do prior to the assassination is they were trying to build up the thing to force him out. And what it was going to be was people from inside of the administration leaking health information. That's what I believed it was going to be.
Oh, yeah, I don't dispute that, but I think the biggest problem that they have is that everybody knows, so leaking health information is not going to do anything for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was pretty convinced that it was going to be Newsom. God forbid. I was pretty convinced it was going to be Newsom.
I was too.
But now, if you notice the demeanor of Kamala, she's not drinking or smoking anymore.
Mm-hmm.
She is not high or drunk, and if you watch her for the last, let's just say 4 years, she's been high or drunk every time she's been in public. And now all of a sudden, the things she's saying don't necessarily make sense, but they're a lot more coherent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she's stepping up her game because, what do you do? What do you do with your voter base if you take the first female vice president minority and push her out along with the president to put in a white guy from Cali? Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't mean it won't happen. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I do think that the move will be some sort of a resignation step that Biden will take that Biden will take the nomination process and then resign after the nomination process, basically putting Kamala up for a default or de facto presidential run without having to really switch up much by way of campaigning.
Yeah.
So late in the game. And quite frankly, I think they'll do that to destroy her, because Trump will absolutely decimate her. Absolutely decimate her.
Yeah.
If it were Trump and Newsom would win.
I don't know if it would be that easy of a win. Newsom would really have to work at it. And before,
yeah, but he beat his recall in a state that actually had enough votes to get him on for recall.
Unlike Biden and Harris, he can actually put sentences together. So yeah, he's a much more formidable candidate. He's
frankly, you go ahead. Sorry, Skip.
Oh, he definitely could easily get Hollywood and all that Hollywood money behind him very easily. So,
well, honestly, he speaks better than Trump. If you weren't voting for Donald Trump because if you weren't voting for Donald Trump because he's Donald Trump and he's not one of the insiders allegedly, you'd look at Donald Trump and go, dude, can you put a sentence together? Just could you please? Just and I know we just lost half of our subscribers.
Here's the thing though, like it does highlight though how thin the Democrat bench, the on deck circle, how thin it really kind of is.
Explain what you mean.
So, like, if Trump, let's say that bullet had been 2 inches to the right, and Trump was not with us today, who would the Republicans take? There would be probably 4 or 5 different candidates that legitimately I could see stepping up and very quickly falling into the role of candidate.
Well, yeah. I don't think you're wrong, but I think anybody that would have stepped into that position would have, quickly been lambasted by all of Trump's ardent supporters as, oh, he's just another rhino. He's or he's just, he's not going to do anything. And here's, let's say it would have been a J.D. Vance. Let's say Trump had already picked J.D. Vance. Let's just put that out there as a hypothetical. Let's say he'd already announced J.D. Vance as his vice presidential running mate, and that bullet hit home the way we're led to believe it was supposed to, and Vance would have been the shoo-in for the presidential nomination at that point. Vance is an insider. He's bought off by AIPAC, which is what all of the, everybody talks about how much they don't want an insider. There's only one person in Washington, D.C. right now besides Rand Paul who's not bought off by AIPAC, and that's Thomas Massie. But everybody else is bought off by AIPAC. And
there's a lot of people unhappy about Vance because of his support with AIPAC.
But that's my point. So no matter who they put up there, it would have been, oh, he's just another insider. But because Trump picked him for vice president, that's going to die off really quick. That will die off very, very quickly. And it was credit to whoever advised Trump to make that decision. He picked somebody that does have some good positions, but he at the same time he sold out. He did. He could have picked somebody He could have picked a Thomas Massie, but no, he's not going to pick a Thomas Massie because he attacked Thomas Massie before he endorsed him, again. And because Thomas Massey voted against him for the CARES Act.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I struggle with people looking at these situations and saying who would step up for the Republicans and say, oh, there's any number of people. No, because whoever they would have picked, Trump supporters would have labeled him a rhino. And here's the news. The deep state Republicans aren't rhinos. They are the true Republicans. Those of you that are mad at them aren't Republican. You're not Republican. You're the rhino. You're the rhino.
Well, okay, so on that, because you are onto something, that they have been the ones who've led the party for decades, and what Trump
since
and
1860.
A lot of them, no, because they weren't.
The Republican Party, since its inception, has been a progressive party.
Yeah, but they're not. Okay, so a lot of these people, even though they talk a big game, they're not Goldwater Reagan Republicans. They'll talk that they are, but they're not.
Progressive. Reagan was a progressive. He was.
I grew up in the Reagan era. You're not going to convince me of that.
So did I. I voted. I didn't vote for him. Voted for Bush because he was Reagan's running mate.
But
I was that guy.
The Trump wing of the party is a populist part of the party, and that also was the Ross Perot side of the party. They just didn't have a lot of power, all those years ago. And like as time has gone on, people have gotten more and more frustrated. They want leaders who'll fight, and that's what Trump represents. But also populism. You look through history, populism always wins out, and it just takes time.
Populism is dangerous.
It can
Populism is dangerous. Not can be, it is. It absolutely is dangerous. I don't care if it's left-wing populism or right-wing populism. It's dangerous. And this is part of the problem. See, I was not planning on this tonight, folks. This was not, I had no idea what we were going to talk about. So here we are. So if the chat's on fire and saying bad things about me, I just want you guys to know I can't see a thing. I have no idea what you're saying about me right now.
What is AIPAC is one question. So that's AIPAC
it is Zionist Israel's lobby, and they have a representative in every single office in the Capitol. Thomas Massey, and I believe, and I'm not making this up. This is absolutely fact. This is a fact. AIPAC has the representative assigned to each member of Congress, House and Senate. And I believe it's Rand Paul and Thomas Massey are the only ones to have refused to work with them. In fact, Thomas Massey was, when he first took office, they handed him, here's what we want you to do. Write your letter in support of Israel.
Well, yeah.
And Thomas Massey said, I'm not doing that. I'm an American. I'm not writing a letter in support of Israel.
And that's, you and I, we both have, our differences when it comes to Israel. But
I don't think we're as far apart as you think we are.
Probably not.
I reject Zionism.
AIPAC represents a lot of money. And I'm not
the money.
Well, I'm not a Nick Fuentes type. I'm not going to be up here.
No, I reject Nick Fuentes out of
hand. As do I. I just will recognize it's a powerful lobby, very powerful lobby.
It is the most powerful lobby. They have more sway than even the military-industrial complex does.
There's a lot of crossover. There with us.
Right, because the Zionist institution.
There's a Venn diagram that's like that.
Right, but that's because the Zionist leadership of geopolitical Israel benefits from the military-industrial complex. So it's in their best interest.
Absolutely.
It's in their best interest to bilk the American taxpayers for everything that they're worth. And AIPAC loves that. But I'm not folks, this is all off the cuff. I'm not off the cuff. I know what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that, but we weren't planning this tonight. So
this is one thing I like about the show. You and I can jump into these, and we both have enough knowledge that we'll just go.
Well, here's the deal. Oh gosh, now I sound like a cop. here's the issue. The American wage slaves are taxed beyond belief, from top to bottom. We are taxed beyond belief. We're sending billions of dollars to Ukraine, which is a waste of money. And 98% of our audience is going to go, yeah, end funding for Ukraine. But we're sending even more to Israel. And we're sending more to Zionist Israel for this, because they're our strong ally in the region. All right, tell that to the guys on the USS Liberty, that Israel is our ally. Because for us to have allies, what's the benefit to the United States taxpayer, to we the people of this republic? What's the benefit of that? What is
Eric says bad TC, no donuts.
I got news for you. I don't eat donuts.
And that is one thing I'm hopeful about a Trump presidency, is he had us on a path to peace in the Middle East. I hope he gets us back on that path, because once we have that, then Israel as an ally becomes less important.
So flesh that out for me, though, Skipper.
Sure.
Tell me when you say that Trump had us, the U.S., the Republic of the United States, on a path towards peace in the Middle East. What part of bombing Syria illegally was a path towards peace in the Middle East? What part of bombing Yemen illegally? What part of killing American citizens illegally overseas with drone strikes? Not just Obama. As much as I despise Obama, Trump authorized and killed teenage children who were at weddings with their families, American citizens. How is it? He authorized the bombing of Yemen with drones and other craft. How on earth is that a path towards peace in the Middle East, other than Israel wanted those countries bombed because Israel perceives them as a threat?
Sure, and I say this as someone who's lived in the Middle East. Most of the Middle East does not want a caliphate. Palestine,
sure,
Hezbollah, even Iran. They want a caliphate, and I know people like to say from the river to the sea. They actually want it to be all of the Middle East. They want it from Persia, which is Iran, all the way to the Mediterranean.
Sure.
And
I don't think. I would be very careful saying Palestine. I think you could say that there are segments of people in Palestine, Hamas would love for that, but the Palestinian people as a whole don't want that.
Not Fatah, the old PLO. They're on the West Bank. They're pretty, they're able to coexist with Israel and do treaties and whatnot. But Hamas and Hezbollah, absolutely not. And when you talk about ISIS and these groups, they're all trying to get the same goal, even though they're a little bit different. It would be like Baptists and Southern Baptists and Pentecostals trying to make the U.S. a theocracy, essentially. Like, they all have the same goal. They just have a little bit of ideological differences religiously as to how that should look. But there are very moderate groups, and this is where I'm going to get a lot of hate. The Saudi royal family, for the most part, is very moderate. There are, you got to think,
until it comes to beheading their own citizens. But I mean, beyond that.
Well, that's not a religious thing. That's more of a cultural thing.
No, that's a Wahhabist practice, because Saudi is in a Wahhabist country.
Well, yes, but it's cultural. It's not so much a religious thing. It's a cultural norm, like that they still practice, which is sad, but some areas still practice that. But the royal family themselves, you got to think the royal family is huge. They have there's something like 78 freaking cousins to the king.
Well, yeah, it's like going to a Pentecostal family reunion in Appalachia. So it's what it's.
And within that, you get pockets
just with far more money.
Everyone's got that crazy uncle. Well, they've got many crazy uncles. Uh, and the Saudi family they're very much on the middle of the balancing scale because while they have power, they also don't have power. They don't really control Mecca and Medina. That's controlled by the imams and the religious police. That's why there's actually two sides with that. And then there's several countries who are very moderate, and then you get countries like I would put Saudi Arabia, Jordan, UAE, Bahrain, all into that camp there. Then you got these ones that just want to cause problems, and I would say that is Oman and Qatar. They don't care, like they're religious, but that's not their. While it is their drive, it's not really their drive. They just want as much power as possible. So their way of doing that is they're going to play both sides. They're going to inject chaos. They're your anti-heroes. And then
so they are the Middle Eastern version of the current United States regime.
Yes. In many ways.
When I say current, I mean since Lincoln, because that's been the drive of the United States since Lincoln was.
I'd actually say since Woodrow Wilson, but okay.
Oh no, I'd go back to Lincoln. Was empire building.
We did attempt to dabble in that, but we failed so bad in the Philippines. We did kind of say, okay, we're not going to do this, at least in colonization ways.
Well, yeah, we just decided we would just be change agents and put people in power.
But there are things that we did like telling every
entire country. We literally, because of the American war, civil, the War of Northern Aggression. There, how's that? I really piss off people. After that, we formed an entire country in Africa that never existed.
Yes, we did.
Hey, here you go, Liberia. Why? Because it means liberty. And what are we gonna do? We're gonna send all the black people that we don't like in our country to go live there, and we're gonna call the capital Monroeville. That's basically, that's it. So I mean,
there are things like that. I'd say the Panama Canal, another example, that absolutely do fit into that. But
sure, So are those countries products? Are those countries products of their own ideological position, or are they products of America's imperialism around the world, and we've fostered that mentality? Because that's the reason Saudi Arabia is moderate in people's eyes, because the United States pays them to be moderate.
I don't know if we exactly pay them.
Oh, no, we pay them millions and billions of dollars a year. Yeah.
They're one of the richest countries. They actually pay us for a lot of stuff.
We pay them to keep the peace. I'll go dig it up. I'll go dig it up for you. But we pay them to keep the peace. It's the same thing with.
I believe there are 4 countries that purchase American, literally will give us cash to purchase American equipment, and Saudi Arabia is actually one of the highest payers. But that doesn't mean we don't discount it. Oh no, they pay cash. Most no, and I've talked about this on the show. When everyone says, oh, we shouldn't be sending all this money overseas. When we do a foreign aid package, most of that money doesn't go overseas. It goes to American companies, and we say, yeah, we're going to build tanks and planes for you, but we give it solely to American companies, and they will get only a portion of it, but the company gets the full check. So we're keeping Americans working with that money, and there's only very few countries that do give us money for that equipment.
I don't even know what to tell you, because you and I get along so well. It's that is not an argument, bro. That's not. We gotta keep doing it because Americans have jobs.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly why when I hear people, this is where I get critical of MAGA people when they're like, "We need to disband NATO." Yeah, that's never happening. That is never going to happen because we've wrapped our economy around NATO, and it's a
Right, but
ticking
that
time
doesn't
bomb
mean we
now.
can't. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be like I'm not MAGA, and I think NATO needs to go the way of the dodo bird, along with the UN, because we fund it all. We fund all of NATO and we fund all of the UN.
The UN doesn't really give us much back, but NATO does. NATO is how
NATO
we.
doesn't do anything for us.
Oh, the NATO standard keeps American workers working. When
That's a terrible reason to keep an imperialistic tool
I
in place.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. But I don't see any way you can just get rid of NATO and not massively put this country into a depression.
Bigger, like I would take a NATO collapse depression over the fostering of American wartime imperialism any day,
I
because we could overcome the depression.
I know you would, but you're not the president. I don't see any president doing that. So,
Right, because they're all sold out.
oh, I'm
All
acknowledging that. Yeah.
Like,
That it's like there's certain things that I do know presidents will say, "Oh, I'm going to do this," and then they get in the office and that's when their people talk to them. They're like, "Yeah, you can't do that. You can't." Just like Israel, like, "Oh, I'm not going to sell stuff to Israel anymore." They'll get into office and be told, "Yeah, we have treaties. You can't do that. You have no authority to do that."
well, but see this, yeah, great segue to a different portion.
I knew you'd like that.
How on fire is the chat right now? How much trouble am I in?
We actually don't have a lot of chats right now.
Oh, what's wrong with you people?
We got some people watching. Not having Twitter is a blow, and not my fault. It's they have to verify you. Just take my money and give me my blue check mark. And be on your way.
Here's the problem with.
Sarah Sanchez says, "Hey, hi guys. Hi, Sarah."
Oh, I know Sarah's on Mossad.
You're gonna put me on a Mossad watch list.
Shit goes. Oh. Like, I'm less afraid of the state troopers than I am of Mossad finding me in Minnesota. So, but here's one that, and you've heard me talk about this. The biggest problem that we have is Americans' mentality, and I know I keep coming back to this because of Lincoln. Lincoln was a strong central government person. He shredded the Constitution. He pissed all over the natural rights of man because he wanted all the power collectivized into Washington, D.C. And we built up the idea of a kingly president, of this saintly, ordained by God presidency. That was Lincoln that created that morass. That he unilaterally created that mentality.
I agree with you that yes, that he did foster a lot of those things, but I know you think it started then and carried forward. When I look at the presidents immediately following Lincoln, like it was bumbling idiot after bumbling idiot until we got to Woodrow Wilson. And a lot of these things that you're talking about, that's when they really started, things like the Federal Reserve.
All of those bumbling idiots were directly set up to be able to be in the positions they were in because of Lincoln. I mean, Lincoln was not an idiot. He was a crafty son of a gun.
I agree with you there.
He was incredibly crafty, but he was evil. Lincoln was evil, pure evil, and a manipulator.
Sarah wants our insights on the RNC. So if you want to keep this discussion or go to that one, I don't care which one.
Well, we could get there. So I haven't watched any of the RNC convention so far because I'm just not there. But what Lincoln did was establish this mentality, the very thing that our forefathers had warned us not to do, which was to have a strong central state with a president as the de facto head of state in anything other than a titular way, which was basically just, yes, can enact treaties, which still had to be approved by Congress.
It's widely accepted.
So that set him up for all these bumbling idiots, and Wilson could swoop in and be the biggest of bumbling idiots. And like Wilson was like not the worst president. I'm always going to reserve that for Lincoln. Lincoln's the worst, and everybody else is measured against him. As far as where they fall on that. But Wilson was the biggest of bumbling idiots. He was just craftier than all the other bumbling idiots. And I'll tell you what, everybody talks about how bad Calhoun was leading up to Lincoln. I'd take 1,000 Calhouns over every president since from Lincoln on. Because Calhoun looked at the situation that was arising and said, we don't need a war. The states have a right to secede. That's the entire purpose of the of the Republic of the United States, was that individual sovereign states have the right to secede. And Lincoln said, the hell they do, not on my watch. And that's what made him this strong central power. And that's what gave Wilson the ability to do what he did. Because the American people in a very short span of time said, President's the most powerful man in the country. The president's the most powerful man in the world. We have to do whatever the president says. And here we sit, the lesser of two evils, for how many presidential elections? Every one of those presidential elections has been the most important presidential election in the history of the United States.
I see what you're saying. However, all the things that you're talking that Lincoln did, they were all confined to his presidency. Like they didn't.
They weren't.
They were.
Though.
Oh,
well, everything
habeas
that
corpus
does is confined to his presidency.
No.
He just paved the way for presidents to be able to do what they do.
No.
Precedents.
Because and I'll show you here. Like, did Lincoln suspend habeas corpus? Absolutely. However, the Supreme Court did rule shortly after Lincoln's death that was unconstitutional and it was undone. So it didn't go. The suspension of habeas corpus didn't go forward. Now, when you're talking about creating the Federal Reserve, instituting an income tax, removing away from the gold standard, those were all things that lasted beyond that. The presidents who did those, it lasted beyond their presidencies, but they created this centralized imperial presidency that you're talking about.
Right. Oh, hold on. I think I'm safe. We'll find. Maybe not. They normally come in 2 or 3. But all of that was the ball started rolling under Lincoln. The entire mentality of just this rule by fiat.
I know what you're saying.
Everybody talks so much smack about Biden's attack and the deep state's attack on Trump. They learned it from Lincoln.
I know what you're saying. I just don't see anything that survived past Lincoln's presidency of any of the centralized stuff, other than he just did it.
Attacking your political enemies and using the power of the state to take them down. He literally imprisoned newspaper owners and newspaper editors. He seized newspapers and took them over. Seized their printing presses because they were printing unfavorable things about him. That's the closest you can get to misinformation control and shutting down on social media of today. So
I agree with you, but that was all determined to be unconstitutional, and that's why.
But it doesn't change the fact. But that's great. They determined it was unconstitutional. But it doesn't stop these jackasses from doing this shit.
Well, it stopped that. But this is why I say. So we're talking precedent. So Wilson.
Presidential precedents. We've created a topic.
So Wilson passed the Sedition Acts, okay, where you couldn't speak out against World War I, and then we have Eugene Debs, a communist, passing out pamphlets telling people, if you get drafted, do not go to war. Protest and stay here. He got put into jail and had to run for president.
In prison.
He ran for prison. And the thing is, he was only released because his sentence, he wasn't pardoned, his sentence was commuted by was it Harding? It was commuted by Harding. So
Yeah.
that remains a precedent. Like at no point has that gone in front of a Supreme Court to say no, that is not wrong. We can't do it again.
The reason why anybody felt any comfort at all of being able to do that, it was because Lincoln made it okay. like oh no, you want to talk bad about the North, and that was the thing. Everything the North did was inextricably linked to Lincolnianism. Everything that the North did was inextricably linked to Lincoln.
There were presidents before Lincoln who did want a stronger centralized government and did work towards that.
But they didn't get it.
Sometimes boundaries need to be pressed so everyone knows where the line is. Yeah, true. Very true, Eric. He says sometimes boundaries need to be pressed so everyone knows where the line is. And
that's a great philosophy until you realize that they're pushing all these boundaries and all the American people are going, that's okay, do it again. But you cannot have a job unless you have a vaccine.
But that's why I say, with Wilson, you look at all the ones from Lincoln to Wilson. You had Cleveland, you had McKinley, you had Rutherford B. Hayes, you had Johnson, you had Grant, all in that area.
Teddy Roosevelt was
Teddy Roosevelt. Yeah, he did things, but he also was a trust buster too. So I mean,
right? But is that the role of the federal government?
If we're talking about keeping a free market economy, yeah, I don't think monopolies don't exist without government help, and he broke up the monopolies. I wish they would break up more monopolies.
So monopolies don't exist unless there's government help, and so then the government comes in and breaks up the monopolies that they helped form to say, look at what we're doing for you.
Government can go either way, and we've seen that. And Roosevelt was a trust buster.
Which is why I'm an anarcho-capitalist and not an American crony capitalist, and I'm definitely not a mercantilist. Which is really what the United States is.
And you'd be shocked as to how much, when it comes to fiscal policy, how much I do agree with you on a lot of this stuff. But yeah, I wish we were breaking up more monopolies. I wish the SEC was doing more.
We don't actually break up any monopolies. We don't. We do not break up any monopolies. What we do
not anymore.
The government steps in, imposes these terrible fines on these corporations. The corporations declare bankruptcy or they go out of business. And instead of letting the people go, you know what? I'll do without cell phone service. Mm. They come in and the government to the rescue steps in and it says, here, let us save you from these terrible, evil corporations that we're going to turn around and bail out later on.
No, I agree with you.
They're too big to fail. So
yeah, I hate bailouts. Yeah, businesses need to fail. Absolutely need to fail. We are doing ourselves such a disservice by not letting businesses fail in this country.
Not just need to fail, it's the natural progression of things that a business will only be around for so long, and then sooner or later it's just going to fall apart.
Evolution is a natural cycle of everything, and if things don't fail, they don't progress. So absolutely, I totally agree with you on that.
It's like wind turbines. They're never going to get better because the government subsidizes the crap out of them.
And they suck. I've got wind turbines half hour from my house, and we get blackouts here, and it's like, why are we getting blackouts? What's in between us and the wind turbines? Nothing. It's desert.
All I have to say is California. So.
Well, yeah. I have to. I live on the top of a hill.
California, and I have Marxisota, so.
I live on the top of a hill. Literally, I'm still part of the mountains of Joshua Tree, and it rained here this week, and we had massive flooding. I have to keep flood insurance. I'm on the hill. It's not gonna. The worst thing that's gonna happen is it's gonna wipe my road out, which partially happened this week with the storm that we had. And I'm like, why do I need flood insurance for this? The people who live down the hill from me who have a foot of water still in their house, I get why they need flood insurance. But why do I need flood insurance?
Well, because it makes it more affordable for the other people.
Pretty much, yeah. But why is the government mandating it? Again, we're talking monopolies. The government's mandating these things.
Right. So they create the thing that they rescue you from.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Not
right.
disagreeing with you at all.
So we're back to Roosevelt. So is he really a trust buster, or was he just rescuing us from the thing that him and all of his cronies created?
No, a lot of this stuff, like there are things that Teddy Roosevelt did that I really hate. But when it comes to the trust busting, like he really wasn't making these things mandatory. Now, FDR absolutely made it all mandatory. That was probably the biggest expansion of the centralized government beyond the power, and that all came from the powers that Woodrow Wilson put in.
Which was, and I'll do it again. I'll take it right back to Lincoln, because Lincoln created the environment that was necessary for a strong central government to control you, and everybody capitalized on it. So then you get to Trump and Biden, and everybody's like, Biden's the worst president in the history of the world. Is he though? Or in the United States? Is he though? I'm like, because Trump expanded government more than any president, all the presidents prior to him combined.
It took almost 50 years from Lincoln to Wilson. So you're not exactly selling me. I see what you're saying.
So it was slow, because they're like, it's like when you're living at home and you're a teenager and your parents, your first time you're going out bike riding by yourself, and your parents are like, you could go bike riding by yourself, but I want you home by lunchtime, and I don't want you any more than 3 blocks from the house. And so you're out riding your bike, and you go, I'll be home by lunch, but I'm going to go 4 blocks from the house. And mom and dad never notice, and you still make it home by lunchtime. And so you do it, and mom's like, good, you made it back by lunchtime. Did you stay 3 blocks from home? And you're like, yep. Sure did. And so then the next day, or maybe you spend the whole week doing that. And so then the next week you go 5 blocks from the house, and you figure out you could still make it home by lunchtime. And pretty soon your brother and sister are following you around, and they got it all figured out. And then one of them turns into a rat fink and tells on you. Now you're in trouble. And then they go out and they're going 8, 9, 10 blocks away from home, and they're still making it back by lunchtime. But you're not there to rat on them because you're grounded. That's what it is. It's taken a while. Sure, Lincoln maybe didn't do what Wilson did, but he also didn't have all the communications. Why are we getting the Blue Falcon?
I just wanted to mess with you a bit.
Like, he didn't have all of the communication power. I mean, and think about it. Wilson, like what he had for communication power versus what Lincoln had was like literally like ages in advanced. Just ages advanced compared to what Lincoln had. Now you look at what and the power of presidents to disseminate information across platforms today. Like, I still take all of this back to the foundation and the dissolution. We lost our republic during the American Civil War. We lost our republic all because Lincoln took it from us. We do not have a republic anymore. He took it from us, and every president since then has capitalized on it. Every single one of them. And so this all goes back to Lincoln. All of it.
I don't know. You haven't convinced me yet. I look.
Fine. You don't have to be right all the
time. I just look at things like, was it the 18th Amendment? How we pick senators. That was something that lasted going forward. I've already mentioned the Federal Reserve.
But okay, go back then. Let's go back to the 14th Amendment then.
The creation of the FCC and the FAA.
Right, but then take it back to the 14th Amendment. Go if you really want to critique those, then take it back to the 14th Amendment. And what was the inception and the impetus for the 14th Amendment? The end of the Civil War. And what did they do with the 14th Amendment?
Guaranteed our
The
rights,
No, they
our,
didn't.
our individual rights.
No, they didn't. That's not what the 14th Amendment did. Because the Bill of Rights never was intended to apply to the individual states. If the states wanted to incorporate the Bill of Rights into their individual constitutions, they had a duty
Correct.
to do so at the state level. But the federal state stepped in and looked at the states and said, we're going to now force you to comply with the 14th Amendment. And for those of you that don't want to ratify the 14th Amendment, we're going to occupy your state with federal forces until you agree to ratify the 14th Amendment. That's how they ratified the 14th Amendment. They sent federal troops into the states until they agreed to ratify.
Yeah, but the 14th Amendment is guaranteeing our individual rights, though.
But the federal government doesn't have a duty to guarantee our individual rights at the state level. It has a duty to protect us at the federal level from federal overreach, and the states have a duty, if they choose, to honor that by incorporating it into their own constitutions. It overrode the power of the individual states' constitutions, and it forced them. We literally occupied American states with federal troops, forcing them to ratify to get the troops removed. That's a massive violation of the Constitution and the powers of the federal government.
Yeah, but the
federal to us by Lincoln.
But the federal troops were there because, you know, there were groups of people literally, you know, denying others their rights.
But it wasn't the state that was. It's not the role of the federal government to occupy a federal state or an individual sovereign state. That's a massive violation of the Constitution. At the federal level. What's the 10th Amendment say?
Oh, any powers not delineated to the federal government are the power of the states.
Granted to the federal government, the federal state, belong distinctly to the people and to the state.
But then we come back to the tyranny of the majority, which is what was happening.
No, that's at that point it's not a tyranny of the majority.
That was absolutely what was happening in the South.
Oh, come on. You don't think the North was the worst offender when it came to the tyranny of the majority?
During antebellum South?
Period. By far the worst offender. Northern states were by far some of the worst when it came to that. I guarantee you, and I don't say this to be a jackass because you and I are well studied, but I guarantee you that the vast majority of people that would watch my show or your show have no idea that the secession movement started in the North.
Oh, no, that's absolutely true. Yeah, absolutely.
Started in the North. Nobody said a word. Nobody said a word about it. They were like, you know what? If Massachusetts wants to secede because they don't want to be part of a republic that has slavery, they should be able to do that. That was literally, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, pages and pages and pages of documentation throughout history of the U.S. But it was only when the South said, in this myth that the South was seceding only over slavery, only because it was a bunch of racist white guys, which is not at all what it was. It had nothing, and slavery was a minor issue for the South, an incredibly minor issue for the South. It was the North that made slavery a massive issue, and it was only done for the political clout. And Lincoln the Emancipation Proclamation, most people don't know this, didn't free a single slave in occupied lands. There were still slaves in the North.
That's true. That's true. There
were still slaves in the North, and occupied southern states, occupied those lands, the slaves weren't free. What Lincoln did is he reached into places like Florida and he reached into places like Louisiana where there were no Northern troops and said, by the way, all your slaves are free. It's like he had no constitutional authority to do that. I'm not saying slavery's right. Slavery is an aberrant, sinful behavior. But if we're going to be constitutionalists, then we have to say that Lincoln didn't have the power to do what he did. But he took it anyway.
Well, yeah, but almost none of that extended beyond his presidency, though. It all ended. And it took 50 years before we had another imperialist, a true imperialist, trying to centralize the government. And when they did it then, it lasted. It lasts today.
Right. But what I'm pointing to is that groundwork was laid by Lincoln. Did Wilson exacerbate it? Absolutely.
There were
Lincoln laid the groundwork.
There were pro-central, anti-federalist presidents before Lincoln, though.
Oh wait, Lincoln was not an anti-federalist, not an American definition. Lincoln was a federalist by American definition. You can't confuse European or English federalism versus anti-federalism.
True. But I mean,
in fact, Jeffersonianism and anti-federalism of North America, of the United States, was what would have been called federalism in the English.
True.
Yeah. So, Jeffersonianism, which is the direction we were headed because of Jefferson, and rightly so, was a very weakened central government.
Yeah, but Jefferson Davis. Or not Jefferson Davis. What's his name? Jackson. Jackson widely expanded the role of the American government. In that time.
When I say Jeffersonianism, I'm referring to Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, but I'm talking about Andrew Jackson.
Okay.
So, ignoring the Supreme Court. Jackson did that.
The Supreme. Okay, but you'd have to. Oh boy, we do not have time for this tonight, Skipper. So
we can put a pin in it.
Well, okay, so we'll tease the audience. Sarah, I'm sorry we didn't get to the RNC. So we'll get to this. The Supreme Court was never meant to have the power that it has. Never. The worst decision that the Supreme Court ever made was Marbury versus Madison.
I was just going to ask you. You're against Marbury versus Madison.
No, they said some really cool things in Marbury versus Madison, like any law that's repugnant to the Constitution is no law at all. But then they turn around and they established for themselves prior to Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court did not have the power of judicial review to determine the constitutionality of everything. So let's
that
think about
was
it
not,
this way.
But that was not counter to what the founding fathers had in mind.
Yeah,
though.
It absolutely was. The Supreme because the Supreme Court established itself as not just the Supreme Court, but the supreme power. What power does the Supreme Court have to make anybody do anything?
I mean, they can compel lots of things.
How does the Supreme Court compel anything?
Well, it's in Article 3, where they have the right to determine how laws are interpreted.
Right, but how do they have the power to do anything?
Right there, they're the ones who.
That's just words on paper that says that they can make a determination.
They're the ones who determine due process.
So how do you make the federal government, how do you make the executive branch do something it doesn't want to do?
Through due process, through enforcing the Fifth and Sixth Amendments.
Okay, so then if the Supreme Court has that kind of power, then they need their own enforcement wing.
No.
Sure, because if they have the power to tell the president, you're doing this and you're doing it tomorrow, come hell or high water, the president can go, no, I'm not. Because the Supreme Court was never intended to have the power of enforcement. The power of enforcement is reserved to the executive branch. Congress is to check the executive branch. The executive branch is to oversee what Congress does, check them, and the courts are to step in and mediate.
So
between those
okay,
two.
I will
They're
say
not to
with
be supreme. They're not to be like people who take I can't think of the class that goes around in all of the conservative circles, and but it's this training that they all talk about, and they all come away going, "No, the Supreme Court was always intended to be superior to all the other branches." That's
it's
literally
not
not what the
superior to the other
Constitution.
branches, but it does have a check against the others.
Sure, as long as the others agree to cooperate.
No,
The Supreme Court, yeah, absolutely, because the Supreme Court cannot make the Congress, the Senate, or the executive branches do anything they don't want to
okay,
do. Just like the executive branch can't make the Supreme Court do anything it doesn't want to do,
okay.
short of using force.
Congress passes a law. Can
Sure,
the executive branch say we're going to ignore it?
yeah, they can. It's called nullification.
See, I don't think that's legal, and the Supreme Court would agree.
Nullification. No, I don't give a shit what the Supreme Court says. If Congress passes a law that says tomorrow we're taking away everybody's AR-15s, you damn sure better hope that somebody in that line of reasoning somewhere says, "Screw you, I'm not doing that." Nullification is absolutely foundational to the United States.
Okay, but when that happens, it goes into the court for decision.
And so then the Supreme Court says, "Yep, you know what? We should take away everybody's AR-15s." So then the executive branch, you better step up and do it.
That's two branches of government against one.
So the executive branch better step up and do it.
Yeah.
So then we might as well just throw away the Constitution.
Well, the hope is that the Supreme Court would actually be looking at the Constitution and
Do you
ruling.
have any hope in the Supreme Court even today? Even today, like right now, like right at this very moment, do you have any hope they'll actually do the right thing? Because
Okay.
right now, for me, it's like pissing in the wind. You don't know what's going to happen, other than you're probably going to get a face full of piss.
Here's one thing I'll say about the Supreme Court. And this is what people don't understand. The Supreme Court the Supreme Court understands it's a heavy hand. And they understand that when they use that heavy hand, there's a big ripple effect. So they don't like to use the heavy hand. That's why they reject so many cases and take so few, is because they're not going to get into the minutia. They'll send it back down to the lower courts and be like, yeah, you got this part wrong. Go back and fix it. And they will.
But they do it all the time.
Not
Terry
really.
v. Ohio is terrible case law.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. There are things that I think they get wrong, but you and I would both say qualified immunity. It's not a thing codified in law. It's only codified in case law. It needs to go away. You and I would agree with that. So
100%.
Yeah. So they don't always get it right.
So they do it all the time. Like Roe v. Wade was terrible case law.
No, that's just yeah, but it got undone. Roe v. Wade was only 45 years in this country.
45 years and 650 million babies.
Yeah, but still, you look at our whole history. That I mean, Plessy versus Ferguson overturned. There's plenty of cases that have been where the court said and now we're getting into what do they call it, prima stasis, where does the Supreme Court, are they bound by their precedent, or are they not bound by precedent? Does precedent not matter, and every case is its own case? This is where we get into those judicial questions, which I know we don't have time for today.
Well, but my point in all of this is, in saying all of these things, is that these are the conversations that nobody, even deep thinking people or people who think they're deep thinking, won't have, because they won't step outside of the boundaries of approved thought, which is the Supreme Court has final say over every law. And if they rule that something's constitutional, then the executive branch has got to enforce it. And if that means the state's not going to, because of the 14th Amendment, if the state doesn't want to enforce it, then it's on to the federal government to step in and make.
Eric corrected me.
It's up to the federal government to force the state to do it.
I never took Latin.
Because the Supreme Court said so. And that's so when you ask this question, I do this all the time with people. Which is more powerful? The federal Supreme Court, SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, or your state's Supreme Court? Which
SCOTUS.
one's more powerful?
SCOTUS.
No, not meant to be. Not meant to be, because SCOTUS has no right to oversee state law. None. But they do it all the time. It was never intended SCOTUS was never intended to oversee the laws of the individual state. It was always the state Supreme Court that was supposed to do that.
See, I don't necessarily agree with you on that one.
No, but
there always has to be an ultimate authority.
Yeah, and it should be your city council.
We're the autonomous collective made up of the whole Monty Python. Made up of a ruling council with one person selected as the head of that council to make all decisions that need to be ratified at a monthly meeting.
Well, you can say what you want, but Python's always on to something.
Oh, I think that's such a great scene, and
But that was the intent. Was the small, strong, localized government where the people had a direct representative say in everything that was happening in their day-to-day lives.
I think they didn't want the Supreme Court to have that type of power, primarily because they did not want.
Only happened under the 14th Amendment when the states were forced to yes, absolutely.
They did not want.
All brought to you by progressive Marxist Republicans.
They didn't want a judicial branch that they had just left. They just left England, where the king was at the head of the judicial branch. They did not want that. They wanted an independent Supreme Court.
So they want an independent Supreme Court where all the justices were appointed by the king. That's what they wanted, and overseen, approved by the House of Commons. That's what you got.
Well, no, approved by the House of Lords,
or by the House of Lords.
Yeah,
the Senate. Excuse me, the Senate. Yeah. And my point is that was intended for oversight of federal laws. The states were expected to be responsible enough to handle their own affairs. It wasn't until much later in the history of the United States where the federal courts began to oversee the state courts and tell them, no, you can't do that, even though that power was never granted to them. It was never granted to them.
Here's one thing I will say that was a power never granted to the federal courts. It was never meant that one federal district judge could rule on a case and say, that is unallowed. I'm going to do an injunction against the whole country. Like, if a district judge is supposed to be you're ruling upon that district. And when districts
only on federal law in that district.
Well, to an extent, I agree. But when each district,
go ahead, finish.
Each district, their district judges are supposed to say, okay, yeah, you have an injunction that applies to that district. Just that district is how that's supposed to go.
As it regards federal law.
But what we have is a judge in Delaware who says, I'm going to grant an injunction. This whole law that's a countrywide law is now invalidated for whatever time frame against all the states. That was not how, because the Supreme Court is supposed to deconflict when different appeals courts when there's a break between the two appeals courts, and then
over federal appellate courts.
And that is why when when one judge in one district says one thing and the appeals court says one thing, and then you go to another district and they have a different way of seeing it, that's when the Supreme Court is absolutely, they have to take those cases. and that's why those ones are fast tracked to the Supreme Court, is
Right.
because we've got very different districts interpreting this in different ways, and that is one thing I will absolutely concede was never ever determined for this country, for the court to have any judge in this country to have that type of power.
Well, sure. Well, thank you for that concession, I think. But what I'm getting at is that our government was never meant to be centralized. It was always meant to be localized, decentralized to the point of the least powerful place was supposed to be at the federal state level, whether it be the Senate, the House, legislature, the president, or the Supreme Court. And everybody would agree, yeah, you don't want the Senate and the House of Representatives making laws for Minnesota or making laws for, like, we can all agree to that. Like, we do not want them making laws for the entire country. You want your state House and your state Senate to be doing that. And if I had it my way, we'd be having these conversations at the local level. And
I think we do have to have some of these at the local level. I will say that.
All of these. If your town wants to pass a city ordinance banning homoerogenous, heterosexual dog freak shows, they should be able to do it, and no one should be able to stop them at all. But now,
that's where I deviate from you. There's the tyranny of the majority. I mean,
that's not the tyranny of the majority. That's a localized decision. That's a localized decision. Period.
So you think a town should be allowed to ban dancing?
If everybody in the town gets together, look, we don't want pure democracy.
The
I'm gonna flat out
Footloose
say
doctrine.
we don't want a pure democracy. One, because in that situation, you're
I agree with you.
You're
Yeah.
gonna get it. You're gonna get, a 51% is gonna get you a lot of shit that you don't want, and at times it might get you shit you do want. Okay, we don't want that. But when you take it down to the most basic level, it always is going to come down to what is the general consensus of the community. That is direct representation. And if your city stands up and throws the middle finger to the state government or the county government or the federal government, because the federal government, via the president, via executive order, or even through the state or through the House or the Senate, says no one can have a job in the United States unless they all agree to this experimental jab. And your city says, not only are we not going to enforce that, we're going to tell businesses to move to this town because we will protect you from the federal government. That's the way it was intended to be.
Okay.
But instead, what we have is the federal government says, no, you will do what we say, or we will bring our troops in and occupy you.
And
that's what we have.
In the situation you just brought up, it's actually been the Supreme
you
Court.
Agree with me.
I agree with you on that, but the situation wasn't that we had federal mandates. We had state and local mandates, and now it's all going in front of the Supreme Court and these appeals courts, and they're being told, no, you can't mandate that stuff to people. That's what you're saying.
But the damage is already done. The damage is already done. By the time the Supreme Court ever gets around to anything, the damage is done. So even when they rule on our side, the damage is done. Look at all of the nurses in the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. Thousands of medical professionals without jobs.
And this is okay.
Because the federal government told Mayo Clinic, you will fire them or else. That was the federal government.
Yeah, but the problem of why that went so slow was not because of the federal government being so big. It's because...
Yes, it did. It's exactly because the strong federal government made the decision, and then it took the strong federal government for freaking ever to overturn it.
It's because the courts put too much emphasis on standing. That's why. Oh, you bought this case. Well, this hasn't damaged you, so you have no standing. You have to bring it later. That's the
No,
problem.
I understand. I understand standing. Try saying that 3 times
'Cause-
fast. I understand standing as the argument you're making, but that's always how this happens.
And I'll give you some examples. L.A. County
We
said
keep saying we can't afford to keep going on about this, but we keep going on about it.
L.A. County said all gun stores closed because of COVID. All gun stores, doesn't matter. Well, guess what? Previously, the Ninth Circuit had ruled in a case up in the Bay Area that, hey, yeah, this town is suing a gun store that wants to open and saying, no, you can't open, and allowed that because they said, well, because there's another gun store in the other part of town where you can buy a gun, this is not an infringement of your Second Amendment rights. They had already determined that. So when LA shut everything down, that was an immediate federal court injunction request saying, hey, they shut them all down. That's a denial of our Second Amendment rights. And the judge said, yeah, absolutely. And the Ninth Circuit has already ruled on it. Injunction, you got to open them all up right now. And that was very quickly done. I think they were only closed for 2 days before a federal injunction came down. But they had standing. The problem with all these other things were the courts rely way too much on standing to act. They're lazy. They would much rather kick us.
So what's the answer? So what's the answer to that? Because you can't. There's nobody that has power over the Supreme Court.
Oh, you can absolutely. They could pass a law saying that, okay, yeah, there's standing, but there's
so
also.
So think about what you just said. This is the problem with the supremacy view of the Supreme Court. They can say whatever the French toast they want to say, order it, and you're obligated to go through with it because they're the Supreme Court.
Congress could absolutely pass laws saying no.
How long does it take Congress to pass? I'm like, unless it's a spending package for the CARES Act.
Yeah, if it's funding for Ukraine, real quick, funding for Ukraine, we'll get that passed next week.
Let's make it hit home for our audience, because I know the vast majority of our audience are going to be Trump supporters. Look at how fast they could get the CARES Act passed. It caused our inflation. It caused our decline, our economic decline. The CARES Act, Trump's CARES Act, caused our economic decline. We got that through really fast. But the Supreme Court can rule tomorrow on something, and by the time, it's what's the old saying that a lie can get all the way around the world before the truth can get its pants on?
Well, yeah.
Well, when the Supreme Court makes a decision, by the time Congress can get around to passing a law to overturn that Supreme Court decision, and then what happens? Then the Supreme Court looks at Congress's law and says, "We've already ruled on this. Your law is unconstitutional because we said so." That's exactly the problem with Supreme Court supremacy.
They would need much more than we've already ruled on this to determine something.
No, they don't. No, they don't. If the Supreme Court makes a decision and the House and the Senate don't like it, and they go and pass a law to overturn the Supreme Court decision, the Supreme Court can literally just say, if somebody brings suit, which smart people do all the time, they bring suit immediately. And once that law passes, because you got to wait till it passes and goes into effect. So by the time the House and the Senate get around to doing it, then it's got its window of time before it actually goes into effect. Then you've got to wait for a victim of the law, and then people sue, and they bring it to the court, and the court will say, "Oh, you have standing. So we're going to fast track this, and we're going to overturn it because we've already ruled on this."
So
that's actually the Supreme Court has way too much power compared to what they were intended to have.
And that's why I like this current Supreme Court, because one case, I can't remember the name of it offhand, but it was one of these final ones they did. It's a sleeper case. No one's talking about it. I see Eric is in the chat talking about the Chevron doctrine. This one's beyond that. This is the one that states if Congress passes a law, you have, I believe they've said you have 6 years to challenge that law. Okay, that's the statute of limitations. Well, I can't remember the case, and I'm really kicking myself. because a couple lawyers that I follow have talked about, and they're like, this is actually a big case that's going to have huge effects on the court, which states.
Don't you love it when Congress writes a law and says you only have X amount of days to challenge it?
Right. Well, here's what the Supreme Court said: these statute of limitations now only apply if that law and the damage that it's going to cause to you, that statute now only comes into effect from the moment where you get damages. So now, if they passed the law in 1975, I wasn't alive, I couldn't challenge it, but let's say it's a thing that
I understand.
let's say I decide I want to start a coal mining company, and now all of a sudden these regulations affect me. Now the Supreme Court has said, sure. The Supreme Court has now said, oh yeah, you can now challenge those laws because now you have damages, and those damages are incurred now. Before it didn't affect you, but now you have standing, so now you have 6 years to challenge that.
Let's end with this because
Sure.
Eric brought up Chevron doctrine. So, yeah, right. I agree 100%. The Chevron doctrine needed to be overturned.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely needed to be overturned. But let's talk about where the Chevron doctrine came from. The Chevron doctrine came from the Supreme Court system of the United States agreeing with unelected bureaucrats that they were experts and had a right to do what they wanted to do, and therefore justices should not be determining these things. So they basically created the Chevron doctrine, and it was only when we have a supposedly conservative court review the Chevron doctrine over this fishing issue. What was it, $750 a day for this little family of fishermen on the East Coast, or was it the East Coast, I think?
East Coast, yeah.
East Coast, going out and having to take this USDA inspector with them every day to the tune of $750. Who, I hate big water. I could do that for $750 a day, by the way. And the Supreme Court overturned their own doctrine. They overturned their own doctrine because it just happened to be the right combination of justices. And so when we put so much power and trust in the Supreme Court for this, sooner or later the shoe's going to be on the other foot, and there are going to be justices in there. They're all going to be like Ketanji Brown, or
I'm going to send you.
And we're going to be really upset when they start to rule against us and go, they shouldn't have that much goddamn power. That's like, yeah, duh.
I'm going to send you a video. Have you ever seen Legal Eagle on YouTube?
I know of him.
Okay, so I'm going to send you a video he did this week or last week about the Chevron doctrine being overturned. And I laughed at it because he had this female lawyer in there talking about how dangerous this is because now judges are going to make these decisions instead of experts.
Oh no, I know I know who the person you're talking about, and that's that was the whole reason that the courts agreed with the Chevron doctrine in the first place. And
I just want to be like
the U.S.
The U.S. government rarely employs experts; they just employ bureaucrats.
Right. No, but that was how we ended up with the Chevron doctrine in the first place, because somebody made a good argument to the courts that they should be able to do that, and the courts are like, yeah, you know what, good point.
The problem with the Chevron doctrine was it was way too strong. It was no, they get to decide. Well, the hurdle that you had to surpass to challenge any
not what our audience
law
wanted to hear tonight.
It's not, but it's our show. It's our show.
They're like, what does this have to do with veterans?
Emotional
I'll bring it full circle. Are you ready?
Oh, wait, what?
I will bring this topic full circle, and I will apply it, because you know I'm really good at this. I can apply this to veterans. Hundreds of thousands of American veterans are getting screwed over by the VA every day. We have friends like Veterans Affairs Media. We have friends like Blind Justice. We have friends like the Angry Vet, who need a solid Supreme Court making the right decisions to shut down government tyranny in the VA. And that's why conversations like this matter. Bingo, I brought it home. Skipper, take us out of here.
Everyone, thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed our discussion. I enjoyed it.
Oh, I'm sure enjoyed is the word they have tonight.
I do want to say, follow us on Twitter. I've got our Twitter things down below. Also join our Facebook group. We also have, let's see, Twitter. We've got the Facebook group. You've got Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. Make sure you're following TC over there. And I'm glad that we're back kind of doing the show semi-regularly. We're getting back into the schedule. Bear with us. I'm doing the producing and hosting and trying to juggle everything, so I apologize for the problems.
And he will promise to turn his fan off in the future because your audio is crap tonight.
Okay, I apologize. I'll set that up. No, it's supposed to, like, at a certain level, take everything out, but I'll play with it. I'll play with those settings. Do you have anything you're plugging?
I am working on, as you know, Skipper, I was way ahead of the story here in Minnesota about Trooper Shane Roper and his, and people don't like it when I say it, but Trooper Shane Roper of the Minnesota State Patrol murdered a young lady back on May 18th through intentional criminal vehicular operation. And I've been covering the story since it happened, and I actually broke the story almost 24 hours ahead of the charging documents being released, that he had four other, in an 8-year career, had four other vehicular incidences that were avoidable, and was never terminated and was allowed to stay on the job. And basically covered up for, and local police department that investigated the accident and the county attorney's office have done their level best to keep this as low key as possible. And I think it was with my work and the work of so many others in our area who paid attention, we were able to actually shed some light on that. And now we're working to make sure he doesn't get a cushy plea deal. He needs to go to trial. He needs to be convicted. He needs to go away for a long time. And the Minnesota State Patrol needs a massive amount of reform, and a lot of heads need to roll. And I've been working on that, but I'm also now working on 2 other stories in this region. One going back almost 25 years about a deputy who, off duty, drove drunk at a street dance and killed a guy, and basically got a slap on the wrist and was given a job in a fire department to make up for losing his sheriff's office job. And another one we're going to be covering has something to do with Rochester Police Department and some shady dealings that they and the Olmsted County Attorney's Office here 2 years ago did to convict this individual. And we're working pretty hard on that. And for those of you that are interested, because of the heat that I've been taking for digging into this Trooper Shane Roper situation, I've had people making a lot of accusations about a lawsuit that I was named in. And sometime this week, I don't know if it's going to be this week or if it's going to be my Monday Night Musings show on Monday. I'm going to actually open up that lawsuit, and I'm going to name the plaintiff, the litigant who named me and the accusations against me. And I'm going to, because I have nothing to hide, because what I was accused of in the lawsuit and in social media over the last week is patently untrue. And as everybody knows, I don't hide anything.
I have been attacked here recently for this show and the work that we do here. I have someone who I shouldn't say powerful. They're powerful, but they don't have power over me, but they think they do, and they are trying to silence me. And
I know how that feels, so I'm with you 100% of the way.
This is exactly. I'll get with you offline later. Exactly what you went through. Exactly. And they're going to learn that they don't have power over me. But beyond that, Eric, he's got his YouTube channel. He's going to be doing a brief live after this, he announced. So go to his channel, KD7LTN on YouTube, and you can check him out. Donate to his Gibson Go campaign. He needs a mobility scooter. Good guy, so make sure you help him out. I do want to thank the staff of Major General Savage for tuning in and supporting this show. So thankful to have all their views. They've helped us tremendously with that. And beyond that,
I'm sensing just a bit of sarcasm.
and everybody else, thank you for watching the show. And as usual, thank you for being worth serving.